The scream that tore through the Missouri night sent every dog in Wyatt howling. And by the time the sheriff arrived at the Hayes boarding house, half the town stood shivering in their nightclothes on the dusty street. Tessa Hayes sat rigid on the front porch steps, her dark hair wild around her pale face, eyes wide and unblinking as she stared at nothing anyone else could see. It was the third night in a row, and folks were starting to talk. "Miss Hayes, you have got to get some sleep," Sheriff Morrison said gently, crouching before her with his hat in his weathered hands. "This cannot go on." "I cannot close my eyes," Tessa whispered, her voice hoarse from screaming. "Every time I do, I see him. I see all of them." The sheriff exchanged a worried glance with Mrs. Patterson, the boarding house owner, who wrung her hands in her shawl. Everyone in Wyatt knew what had happened 3 weeks ago when Tessa had taken the stage from Kansas City to visit her aunt. The Dalton gang had stopped the coach 15 miles outside of town, and what had started as a simple robbery had turned into a bloodbath when one passenger foolishly drew a hidden derringer. Tessa had been the only survivor, found by a cattle drive crew the next morning, wandering the prairie in shock, her traveling dress stained with blood that was not her own. "Doc Williams can give you something to help you rest," the sheriff offered, but Tessa shook her head violently. "No. No medicines. I need to stay awake. If I sleep, I am back there, trapped in that coach, watching them die over and over again." Mrs. Patterson made a small sound of distress. "But child, you will make yourself sick. You have barely eaten and you look half dead yourself." "Better half dead than fully mad," Tessa said, and there was a brittleness to her laugh that made everyone uncomfortable. The crowd began to disperse as the October night grew colder, people returning to their warm beds with pitying looks cast over their shoulders. The sheriff stayed a while longer, but eventually even he had to admit there was nothing more he could do. Tessa remained on the porch until dawn painted the sky pink and gold, and only then did she drag herself inside to face another day of exhaustion. By the end of that week, Tessa could barely function. She moved through the boarding house like a ghost, jumping at shadows, flinching at sudden noises. She spilled coffee, dropped plates, and once stood in the middle of the dining room for a full 5 minutes, staring at nothing until Mrs. Patterson gently guided her to a chair. Dark circles ringed her eyes, and her hands trembled constantly. It was on a Saturday evening, when the sun hung low and golden over the Missouri River, that Wade Sutton rode into Wyatt for the first time in 3 years. He was leaner than when he had left, harder, with new scars and old ghosts in his eyes. The town had changed little, which was both a comfort and a disappointment. He guided his buckskin mare down Main Street, noting which businesses had survived and which had shuttered, until he reached the Silver Dollar Saloon. The bartender recognized him immediately. "Wade Sutton, heard you were down in Texas, working the big ranches." Wade confirmed, ordering a whiskey. "Figured it was time to come home." "Well, your timing could be better. Town's been in an uproar." The bartender, Pete Davis, leaned in conspiratorially. "You remember Thomas Hayes, had that dry goods store?" Wade nodded. Thomas Hayes had been a kind man who had once given Wade's mother credit when times were lean. "Well, his daughter came to stay with her aunt, Clara Morrison, the sheriff's wife. Poor girl survived that Dalton gang massacre 3 weeks back, only one who made it out alive. Now she cannot sleep, screams every night like the devil himself is after her. Whole town hears it. It is a damned shame." Wade's jaw tightened. He had heard about the Dalton gang's increasing violence, the way they had grown more vicious with each robbery. The girl getting any help? What help is there for something like that? Doc says there is nothing physically wrong with her, but her mind is broken by what she saw. Mrs. Patterson at the boarding house is beside herself. Says the girl will not last another week if she does not sleep soon. Wade finished his whiskey in silence, a plan forming in his mind. He had seen men during the war who could not sleep, haunted by what they had witnessed. Some of them had found relief in knowing someone stood watch, that they could let their guard down because another kept vigil. It was a long shot, but it was something. He found the Hayes boarding house easily enough. It was a tidy 2-story building with a wraparound porch and flowers in window boxes that were starting to wilt with the approaching winter. Mrs. Patterson answered his knock, her round face creased with worry and fatigue. Mrs. Patterson, I am Wade Sutton. I do not know if you remember me, but my mother used to work for the Hendersons before she passed. Recognition flickered in her eyes. Wade Sutton. Yes, I remember. You went off to fight in the war. What brings you to my door? I heard about Miss Hayes and her trouble sleeping. I think I might be able to help. Mrs. Patterson's expression turned skeptical. You are the 10th person to say so, young man. Everyone means well, but nobody can do a thing for that poor child. I am not asking to do anything to her, Wade said carefully. I am offering to stand guard, outside her door at night. Sometimes when a person has been through trauma, they just need to know someone is watching over them. Someone they can trust to keep them safe while they rest. You want to stand guard all night, outside her room? Yes, madam, every night if need be, until she can sleep again. Mrs. Patterson studied him for a long moment. Why would you do such a thing for a girl you do not even know? Wade looked away toward the darkening sky. Because I know what it is like to be haunted, madam, and I know what it is like when nobody understands. Something in his voice must have convinced her, because Mrs. Patterson sighed and opened the door wider. She is in the parlor. Been sitting there all afternoon, staring at the wall. But I warn you, she is skittish. Do not make any sudden moves. Tessa Hayes was the most beautiful woman Wade had ever seen, despite the ravages of sleeplessness that marked her face. She sat in a wingback chair near the window, her dark hair pulled back in a simple braid, her dress a somber gray that made her skin look even paler. Her hands gripped the arms of the chair so tightly her knuckles were white, and her eyes darted constantly toward the window, the door, the hallway, never resting. Miss Hayes, Mrs. Patterson said softly, and Tessa jumped as though she had been shot. This is Wade Sutton. He would like to speak with you. Those dark eyes fixed on Wade with an intensity that was almost painful. He could see the intelligence behind the fear, the strength that was barely holding her together. I will leave you two to talk, Mrs. Patterson said, withdrawing with obvious reluctance. Wade pulled up a chair, making sure to keep a respectful distance. Miss Hayes, my name is Wade Sutton. I heard about what happened to you, and I am deeply sorry for your loss and your suffering. Tessa said nothing, but her eyes never left his face. I am not here to tell you that you need to sleep, or that you should get over it, or anything else that people have probably been saying. I am here to offer you something different. What? Her voice was barely a whisper, rough from disuse and screaming. A guard. Someone to watch over you while you rest. Someone to make sure nothing and no one can hurt you while your eyes are closed. Tessa's laugh was bitter. You think posting a guard will help me? You think knowing someone is outside my door will make the nightmares go away? No, Wade said honestly. I think the nightmares will come regardless. But I think maybe, if you know someone is standing between you and the world, someone who will not let anything touch you, you might be able to close your eyes long enough for your body to get the rest it desperately needs. You do not even know me. Why would you do this? Wade was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. I fought in the war, Miss Hayes. I saw things no man should see, did things I wish I could forget. For a long time after, I could not sleep either. I understand what you are going through more than most. What made you able to sleep again? Time. and having brothers in arms who took turns standing watch, who let me know I was not alone. I cannot give you back the time or erase what happened, but I can give you the watch." Tessa studied him for a long time, her exhausted mind trying to process his offer, to find the trap or the ulterior motive. But there was something solid about Wade Sutton, something steady in his gray eyes that spoke of a man who kept his word. "You would stand outside my door all night." "Every night, as many nights as it takes." "Why should I trust you? I do not know you. You should not trust me," Wade said simply. "Not yet. Trust has to be earned, but I am asking for the chance to earn it. If at any point you want me to leave, I will. No questions, no arguments." Tessa's hands loosened slightly on the chair arms. "When would you start?" "Tonight, if you are willing." She closed her eyes briefly, and Wade saw the deep tremor that ran through her. When she opened them again, there was a desperate hope there that nearly broke his heart. "All right. But if I scream, you do not come in. You just stay there. Promise me." "I promise." That night, as darkness settled over Wyatt like a heavy blanket, Wade Sutton took up his post outside Tessa Hayes' door. He brought a straight-backed chair from the dining room, his rifle, and a determination that had carried him through war and hardship. Tessa had not spoken to him again before retiring, but he had seen the way she glanced at him as she climbed the stairs, a mixture of fear and hope warring in her expression. The boarding house settled into quiet. Mrs. Patterson had retired to her own room, and the other boarders, a traveling salesman and a widow who taught at the schoolhouse, had long since blown out their lamps. Wade sat in the darkness, his back straight, his senses alert. He had done this before, kept watch through dangerous nights, and the familiarity of it was almost comforting. An hour passed. Then, too, Wade heard the small sounds of Tessa moving in her room, pacing, sitting, pacing again. He imagined her fighting against exhaustion, trying to keep her eyes open through sheer force of will. Around midnight, he heard the creak of her bed as she finally lay down. Then silence. Wade counted to 100, then 200, still quiet. The scream, when it came, was worse than he had expected. It was raw and primal, the sound of someone reliving their worst nightmare. Every instinct Wade had screamed at him to burst through that door, but he had made a promise. Instead, he stood, moved closer to the door, and spoke clearly. "I am here, Miss Hayes. You are safe. I am standing guard, and nothing will get past me. You are in Wyatt, Missouri, in Mrs. Patterson's boarding house. It is October 1878. You are safe." The screaming stopped abruptly. He heard ragged breathing, then sobbing. "I am here," Wade repeated, his voice steady and calm. "I am not going anywhere." The sobbing gradually quieted. Wade returned to his chair and waited. 20 minutes later, he heard Tessa get back into bed. This time, she did not scream, though he could hear her restless movements throughout the night. When dawn broke and golden light streamed through the hallway windows, Wade stood and stretched his stiff muscles. Tessa's door opened cautiously, and she peered out at him with red-rimmed eyes. "You stayed," she said, wonder in her voice. "I said I would. I screamed. You did, and I stayed right here just like I promised." Tessa's eyes filled with tears. "I slept. Not much, not well, but I slept. For the first time in 3 weeks, I actually slept." "That is a start," Wade said gently. "Will you come back tonight? I will be here." Over the following days, a routine established itself. Wade would arrive at the boarding house at dusk, take his post outside Tessa's door, and remain there until dawn. Each night, Tessa slept a little longer, screamed a little less. During the days, Wade took odd jobs around town, repairing fences, mucking stables, anything to earn his keep and stay busy. The town watched this unusual arrangement with curiosity and varying degrees of approval. Some thought it improper, despite Mrs. Patterson's assurances that Wade never entered Tessa's room and maintained perfect propriety. Others thought it was the sweetest thing they had ever seen, a cowboy standing guard over a traumatized young woman. On the fifth night, Tessa left her door open a crack. Wade could see the faint glow of her lamp and hear her moving about in her room. After a while, she spoke through the opening. "Wade." "Yes, Miss Hayes. Will you tell me about the war, about how you got through it?" Wade was silent for a moment. He did not like talking about the war, but if it would help her, he would dredge up those memories. "What do you want to know? How did you keep going? When things were terrible, when you saw things you wish you could forget, how did you make yourself continue?" "I found things to hold on to," Wade said slowly. "Small things. The way coffee tasted in the morning, the sound of rain on tent canvas, letters from home. And I made myself remember that the terrible moments, as much as they felt like they would last forever, were just moments. They passed. Life kept moving forward, even when I did not think it could. Does it get easier? The remembering, it gets different. The memories do not go away, but they lose some of their power. They become something that happened to you rather than something that is happening to you. Does that make sense?" "I think so." Tessa was quiet for a moment. "I keep thinking about the other passengers. Mrs. Thornton was traveling to her daughter's wedding. Mr. Lee was going home to his wife after a business trip. They had lives, futures, and then they just did not. And I survived, but I do not know why. I do not know what makes me special enough to live when they died." "Nothing makes you special," Wade said, and heard her sharp intake of breath. "I do not mean that cruelly, Miss Hayes. What I mean is that survival is not about deserving or being special. It is about luck and chance and 1,000 factors we cannot control. You did not survive because you are better than them. You survived because that is what happened. The question now is what you do with that survival. I do not know what to do with it. You do not have to know yet. Right now, you just have to keep breathing, keep moving forward. The rest will come." That night, Tessa slept for 4 hours straight, and when she woke, she did not scream. Wade heard her crying softly, but it was a different kind of crying than before. It was grief, pure and simple rather than terror. "I am here," he said quietly, and the crying gradually stilled. As the days turned into weeks, Tessa began to heal in small, incremental ways. She started eating more. Her hands stopped trembling quite so much, and some color returned to her pale cheeks. She began to venture out of the boarding house during the day, taking short walks with Mrs. Patterson or sitting on the porch watching the town go by. And she began to talk to Wade. At first, it was just a few words exchanged when she opened her door in the morning or before he took up his post at night. Then it became longer conversations through the cracked door after she retired. She asked him about his life, his family, his dreams. He told her about growing up in Missouri, about his mother's death when he was 16, about the war and the years after when he had drifted from job to job, never quite finding a place to belong. "Why did you come back to Wyatt?" Tessa asked one night. Wade considered the question. "I think I was tired of running. I spent so long trying to outrun my past, my memories, that I forgot what it felt like to have roots. I wanted to come home, to see if I could build something here. And then you met me, a broken mess who cannot sleep without someone standing guard." "You are not a broken mess," Wade said firmly. "You are a survivor dealing with trauma. There is a difference. You are kind to say so." "I am not kind. I am honest." Through the crack in the door, Wade could see Tessa's silhouette as she sat on her bed. She had started leaving the door open wider each night, and he took it as a sign of growing trust. "Wade, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Is there someone waiting for you, a wife or a sweetheart?" Wade's heart beat a little faster. "No. There was a girl once before the war, but she married someone else while I was gone. I have not met anyone since who made me want to stay in one place. That must be lonely. It can be. But I have learned that loneliness is different from being alone. I would rather be alone than with the wrong person. Tessa was quiet for a long moment. I was engaged once. His name was Daniel, and we grew up together in Kansas City. He wanted to marry me right away, but I convinced him to wait until I finished my teaching certificate. He died of pneumonia last winter. I came here to stay with my aunt and uncle to get away from all the memories. Her laugh was soft and sad. I was running too, I suppose. I am sorry for your loss. Thank you. The strange thing is, I find myself thinking about him less and less. Does that make me terrible? No. It makes you human. Grief changes over time. It does not mean you loved him any less. My Aunt Clara, the sheriff's wife, she tells me I should come stay with her and Uncle Henry. She worries about me imposing on Mrs. Patterson. Wade felt a cold knot form in his stomach. If Tessa moved to the sheriff's house, there would be no reason for him to stand guard. The sheriff would take over that duty, or they would put her in a room where other family members were close by. His nightly vigil would end. Is that what you want? He asked, keeping his voice neutral. I do not know. I feel safe here. And you are here. The admission hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning neither of them was quite ready to examine. I could stand guard at the sheriff's house if that is what you need, Wade offered. Would you? Even if it is not convenient. I gave you my word, Miss Hayes. That does not expire just because of a change of address. Tessa appeared in the doorway then, fully visible for the first time. She wore a simple white nightgown with a shawl wrapped around her shoulders, and her dark hair hung loose down her back. In the lamplight, she looked younger than her 22 years, vulnerable and lovely. Why are you doing this, Wade? And please do not tell me it is just because you understand what I am going through. There has to be more to it than that. Wade stood slowly, acutely aware of the impropriety of this moment, but unable to walk away from her direct question. When I first saw you, sitting in that parlor looking like the weight of the world was crushing you, I recognized something in you. A strength that had not quite been beaten down, a will to survive even when survival seemed impossible. I have spent the last 3 years drifting, feeling like I did not have a purpose. Standing guard over you, helping you heal, it gave me something I had been missing. It gave me a reason to be somewhere, to do something that mattered. I matter to you, Tessa whispered. Yes, you matter to me. They stood there, facing each other across the threshold of her room, the space between them charged with something neither had expected. Then Tessa smiled, a real smile, and it transformed her entire face. Good night, Wade. Thank you for keeping me safe. Good night, Miss Hayes. Sleep well. She closed the door, but not before Wade caught the look in her eyes. Something had shifted between them, an acknowledgement of feelings that went beyond gratitude and duty. That night, Tessa slept for 6 hours without waking once. Autumn deepened into early winter, and with it came a subtle shift in the dynamic between Wade and Tessa. She began to heal more noticeably, laughing occasionally, taking interest in the world around her. She accepted her aunt's invitation to Sunday dinners and started helping Mrs. Patterson with the boarding house chores. The nightmares still came, but less frequently, and Wade's presence outside her door seemed to keep the worst of them at bay. The town had accepted Wade's vigil as normal now, and he had picked up regular work at the livery stable, which allowed him to earn enough to rent a small room above the feed store. But every night, without fail, he showed up at the boarding house to stand guard. It was on a cold November evening, with the first snow of the season dusting the streets, that everything changed. Wade had taken his usual post, and Tessa had retired to her room with a book. Around 10 o'clock, he heard her door open and she emerged in her nightclothes with her shawl wrapped tightly around her. "Wade, it is freezing in the hallway. Would you consider coming inside? You could sit by the door and I would leave it open. Mrs. Patterson has already gone to bed, and I do not want you to catch pneumonia out here." Wade hesitated. It felt like crossing a line, even though her suggestion made practical sense. "I do not want to compromise your reputation, Miss Hayes. I think my reputation can survive you sitting in a chair inside my room rather than outside it. Besides, you have been nothing but a perfect gentleman. Please, Wade, I would feel terrible if you got sick because of me." He could not argue with her logic, and truth be told, he was cold. "All right. But the door stays open." "Agreed." Wade moved his chair inside, positioning it near the door where he could see both the hallway and the room. Tessa settled back onto her bed with her book, but he noticed she was watching him more than reading. "What are you reading?" he asked. "Jane Eyre." "Have you read it?" "No, I am not much for novels. It is about a woman who faces many hardships but remains true to herself. I find it comforting." Tessa closed the book and set it aside. "Wade, can I ask you something, always? What will happen when I do not need you to stand guard anymore? Will you leave Wyatt?" The question struck at the heart of what Wade had been trying not to think about. "I do not know. I suppose that depends." "On what?" "On whether I have a reason to stay." Tessa pulled her shawl tighter, her eyes searching his face. "Would I be reason enough?" Wade's breath caught. "Miss Hayes, Tessa, I do not want you to feel obligated to me because I have helped you. What I have done freely." "I know that, but that is not what I asked." She stood and crossed the room until she was standing directly in front of him. "I am asking if you would stay in Wyatt for me. Not out of duty or obligation, but because you want to." Wade stood slowly, acutely aware of how close she was, how her eyes reflected the lamplight, how her hair fell in soft waves around her face. "I would stay for you. I would stay anywhere if you were there." "Then stay. Not just as my guard, but as something more, as someone who is part of my life, part of my future." "Tessa, you have been through so much. I do not want you to confuse gratitude with something deeper." She reached out and placed her hand on his chest, right over his heart. "Do you think I do not know my own mind? Do you think I am so fragile that I cannot tell the difference between gratitude and love?" "Love," Wade whispered. "Yes, love. I have fallen in love with you, Wade Sutton. With your steady presence, your kind words, your unwavering dedication. With the way you see strength in me when I feel weak, the way you give me space to heal while still being there to catch me if I fall. I love you, and I think maybe you might love me too." Wade cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away tears she did not know she was crying. "I do love you. I have loved you for weeks now, but I did not think I had the right to say it. You are so far above me, so much better than a drifter cowboy with nothing to his name. You have something no amount of money could buy. You have honor and courage and a heart that cares deeply even when you try to pretend otherwise. That is worth more than anything else." Wade kissed her then, gentle and reverent, pouring all of his feelings into that single moment. Tessa kissed him back, her arms wrapping around his neck, and for the first time since the massacre, she felt truly safe. Not because someone was standing guard, but because she had found someone who saw all of her, the broken parts and the strong parts, and loved her anyway. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, foreheads pressed together. "I should not have done that," Wade said. "Your aunt and uncle will have my hide." Tessa laughed, the sound light and free. "Let them try. You are not getting rid of me now, Wade Sutton." "I do not want to get rid of you. I want to court you properly with respect and intention. I want to build something real with you." "Then do it. Court me. But know that I have already made up my mind. You are the man I want, the only man I can imagine building a future with." They talked late into the night, making plans and dreaming of possibilities. Wade told her about his hope of saving enough money to buy a small ranch, of raising horses and cattle. Tessa told him about her teaching certificate, about her dream of opening a school for children in rural areas who did not have access to education. "We could do both," Wade said thoughtfully. "A ranch with a school on the property. You could teach, and I could work the land." "That sounds like a dream. Then let us make it real." As the night deepened and Tessa's eyelids grew heavy, Wade kissed her forehead and returned to his chair by the door. "Sleep now. I will be right here." "I know," Tessa murmured, already drifting off. "I always know." That night, Tessa slept through until morning without a single nightmare, and when she woke, the first thing she saw was Wade, still keeping watch, and she knew she had finally found her way home. The next day, Wade went to the sheriff to formally ask permission to court Tessa. Sheriff Henry Morrison and his wife Clara were waiting in their parlor, having been expecting this conversation. "You want to court my niece?" Sheriff Morrison said, not quite a question. "Yes, sir, with your permission and blessing." Clara Morrison studied Wade with sharp eyes. "You have been standing guard over her for almost 2 months now. Some might say you have already been courting her." "I have been helping her heal, Mrs. Morrison, but my intentions have always been honorable. I love Tessa, and I want to build a life with her if she will have me and if you will allow it." "What can you offer her?" the sheriff asked. "What kind of future?" "Right now, I work at the livery stable and take odd jobs around town. I have saved most of what I have earned. It is not much yet, but I am a hard worker and I am not afraid of doing what it takes to provide for a family. I am looking at a piece of land west of town, about 200 acres. The owner is willing to sell it cheap because it needs a lot of work. I figure with a few good years I could build a decent ranch there." Clara leaned forward. "And what about Tessa's dreams? She has a teaching certificate. She wants to educate children." "I know, madam. I would never ask her to give up her dreams for mine. I figure we can build a schoolhouse on the property, and she can teach local children. Make it a place where learning and honest work go hand in hand." The sheriff and his wife exchanged a long look, one of those wordless conversations that long-married couples could have. "You make my niece happy," Clara finally said. For the first time since that terrible incident, she smiles. She laughs. She has hope again. That is worth more than any amount of money or property. "You have my permission to court her," Sheriff Morrison said. "But Wade, if you hurt her, if you prove to be anything less than the man you are presenting yourself as, you will answer to me. Understand?" "Yes, sir, I understand." Clara smiled then, warm and genuine. "Welcome to the family, Wade. We will have you both over for Sunday dinner this week. Tessa should be here when we discuss this properly." Wade left the Morrison house feeling lighter than he had in years. He had a purpose, a future, and a woman he loved who loved him in return. The darkness of his past seemed further away than it had ever been. That evening, when he arrived at the boarding house, Tessa met him at the door with a radiant smile. "Aunt Clara sent word. You spoke to them." "I did. They gave their blessing." Tessa threw her arms around him, not caring who might see. "I am so happy I could burst." Mrs. Patterson appeared in the doorway, her round face beaming. "Well, it is about time you two made things official. Half the town has been taking bets on when you would get around to it." Wade laughed, a sound that came easier these days. "We were not that obvious, were we?" "Young man, you have been staring at her like she hung the moon for 6 weeks, and she has been doing the same to you. The only people who did not know you were in love were the two of you." Over the following weeks, Wade and Tessa settled into their courtship with a combination of propriety and passion that kept the town gossips entertained. Wade still stood guard most nights. though now he was allowed to sit inside Tessa's room with the door open, and they would talk for hours about everything and nothing. Tessa's nightmares continued to fade, occurring only once or twice a week now, and even then they were less intense. She had started attending church services again, visiting the graves of the passengers who had died in the massacre to leave flowers and say prayers. It was her way of honoring their memory and finding closure. Wade worked tirelessly at the livery and took on extra jobs, saving every penny toward the purchase of the land he wanted. Tessa used her free time to organize a small lending library at the church and give informal lessons to children whose families could not afford formal schooling. Winter settled over Wyatt with snow and ice, and on Christmas Eve, Wade asked Tessa to take a walk with him. They bundled up against the cold and strolled through the quiet streets, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "I have something for you," Wade said when they reached the edge of town, where they could see the dark expanse of prairie stretching out under a sky full of stars. He pulled a small box from his coat pocket and handed it to her. Inside was a simple gold ring with a small sapphire. "It belonged to my mother," Wade said softly. "It is the only thing of hers I have left. I would be honored if you would wear it." Tessa's eyes filled with tears. "Wade, are you asking me to marry you?" "I am. I know we have not been courting long, but I know my heart. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, Tessa Hayes. I want to build our ranch, raise our children, grow old watching the sunset from our porch. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Tessa said, her voice strong and sure. "Yes, I will marry you." Wade slipped the ring onto her finger, and they stood there in the snow, holding each other and dreaming of their future together. They were married in the spring, on a warm April day when the prairie was covered in wildflowers. The entire town turned out for the wedding, which was held at the church with Reverend Thomas officiating. Tessa wore a dress of ivory silk that had been her mother's, altered to fit her slender frame. Wade wore a new suit that Clara Morrison had insisted on buying him, though he had protested. Sheriff Morrison walked Tessa down the aisle, and there were few dry eyes when Wade's voice broke slightly as he said his vows. "I promise to love you, honor you, and stand guard over your heart for all the days of my life. I promise to be your partner, your friend, and your home. I promise to never let you face the darkness alone." Tessa's vows were equally heartfelt. "I promise to love you with all that I am and all that I will become. I promise to trust you, support you, and build dreams with you. I promise to be your safe harbor and your greatest adventure." When Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife, Wade kissed Tessa with a tenderness that spoke of deep love and deeper commitment. The reception was held at the Silver Dollar Saloon, which had been decorated within an inch of its life by the women of Wyatt. There was food and music and dancing, and for one perfect day, the town celebrated love and new beginnings. That night, Wade carried Tessa over the threshold of their small room above the feed store, which would be their home until the ranch house was built. He set her down gently and cupped her face in his hands. "Are you nervous?" he asked softly. Tessa smiled, radiant in the lamplight. "No, I am with you. I am never nervous when I am with you." They made love that night with a combination of passion and reverence, discovering each other slowly, learning what brought pleasure and joy. Afterward, Tessa lay in Wade's arms, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I used to think I would never feel safe again," she whispered. "I thought the fear would be with me forever. And now I know that home is not a place, it is a person. You are my home, Wade." He kissed the top of her head. "And you are mine." True to his word, Wade purchased the 200 acres west of town that summer. The land was rough and wild, but it had good water from a creek that ran through the property and enough grass to support a decent herd. He and Tessa camped on the land while they built their home, a simple but sturdy house with 3 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a large front porch. Tessa designed the schoolhouse, which Wade built about 100 yards from the main house. It was a single room with large windows to let in light, a wood stove for heat, and benches that Wade crafted with his own hands. They named it the Prairie Hope School, and Tessa taught there 3 days a week, with children coming from farms as far as 10 miles away. The ranch thrived under Wade's careful management. He started with a small herd of cattle and a few good horses, breeding and training them with a skill that surprised even himself. Tessa kept a large garden, chickens, and a milk cow, and together they built a life that was simple but rich with purpose and love. In the fall of their 2nd year of marriage, Tessa discovered she was expecting a child. Wade was beside himself with joy and worry, fussing over her constantly until she laughingly threatened to ban him from the house. "I am pregnant, not fragile," she told him. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time." "But not my baby," Wade said, his hand resting protectively on her still flat stomach. "Not the most precious thing in the world." Their son was born in May, during a thunderstorm that rattled the windows and lit up the prairie with lightning. Doc Williams attended the birth, along with Clara Morrison and Mrs. Patterson, while Wade wore a path in the kitchen floor with his pacing. When he was finally allowed into the bedroom, he found Tessa tired but glowing, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blue blanket. "Meet your son," she said softly. Wade took the baby with trembling hands, staring down at the small face in wonder. "He is perfect. You are perfect." "We should name him," Tessa said. "I was thinking William after your father." Wade's eyes filled with tears. His father had died when Wade was young, but he had been a good man, hardworking and honest. "William Sutton, Billy for short." "Billy," Tessa agreed. "Welcome to the world, little one." Billy was a healthy, happy baby who grew into a curious toddler and then an energetic child. 2 years after Billy's birth, Tessa had a daughter they named Marie, after Wade's mother. Marie was as different from her brother as night from day, quiet and thoughtful where Billy was loud and adventurous. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. Wade hired on a few ranch hands to help with the cattle, and Tessa expanded the school, adding primers and slates so children could take their learning home with them. They became pillars of the community, known for their generosity and fairness. On quiet evenings, after the children were asleep and the ranch was settled for the night, Wade and Tessa would sit on their porch, watching the sun set over the prairie they had claimed as their own. "You ever have nightmares anymore?" Wade asked one such evening, Tessa tucked against his side. "Rarely. And when I do, I remember that I survived, that something terrible happened, but it did not define me. I found you, I built this life, and that matters more than the darkness ever could. I am proud of you, of the woman you are, the mother you have become. And I am grateful for you. For the cowboy who stood guard outside my door until I could find the strength to face the morning light. You saved me, Wade." "We saved each other," Wade corrected gently. "I was as lost as you were, just in a different way. You gave me a reason to stay, to build, to love. You made me want to be better than I was." Tessa turned in his arms and kissed him, a kiss that still held all the passion and promise of their wedding day. "I love you, Wade Sutton. I love you, Tessa Sutton, today, tomorrow, and all the days after." Years passed, and their family continued to grow. After Marie came another son, Thomas, named for Tessa's father, and then another daughter, Grace. The ranch house was expanded to accommodate the growing brood, and the Prairie Hope School became so successful that Tessa trained 2 assistant teachers to help manage all the students. Wade's reputation as a horseman spread throughout Missouri, and into neighboring states. People came from far and wide to buy his well-trained stock, and the Sutton Ranch became synonymous with quality and integrity. Through it all, Wade never forgot those first nights standing guard outside Tessa's door. On their 10th wedding anniversary, he gave her a painting he had commissioned from a traveling artist. It showed a cowboy sitting on a chair outside a closed door, silhouetted against lamplight with the inscription beneath, "Where love stands guard, fear cannot enter." Tessa cried when she saw it. "You remembered." "I remember everything about falling in love with you. How could I forget the moment my life began?" Their children grew strong and capable, learning the value of hard work and the importance of compassion from their parents' example. Billy took over more and more of the ranch operations as he grew older, showing a natural talent for both animal husbandry and business. Marie inherited her mother's love of learning and eventually took over the Prairie Hope School. Thomas became a skilled carpenter, building homes and businesses throughout the county. Grace, the youngest and most adventurous, shocked everyone by becoming a veterinarian, one of the first women in Missouri to do so. Tessa's aunt and uncle remained close, with Sunday dinners at the Sutton Ranch becoming a tradition that continued even after Sheriff Morrison retired. Mrs. Patterson, now elderly but still sharp, visited often, delighting in watching the children grow and reminding everyone that she had known Wade and Tessa would end up together from the very beginning. As Wade and Tessa entered their middle years, their love deepened in the way that only comes from shared experience and unwavering commitment. They had weathered droughts and harsh winters, sickness and loss, triumph and disappointment, always together, always united. On a warm summer evening, when Wade was 52 and Tessa was 50, they sat on their porch watching the sunset, just as they had done countless times before. Their grandchildren played in the yard, Billy's 3 children and Marie's 2, their laughter ringing out across the prairie. "Do you ever think about what your life would have been like if I had not survived that massacre?" Tessa asked quietly. Wade was silent for a moment, considering. "I try not to. The thought of a world without you in it is unbearable. I used to think surviving was a curse, that I was being punished by being forced to remember, to carry those memories forever. But now I see it differently. I survived so I could find you, so we could build this life, this family. Those people who died, I honor their memory by living fully, by loving deeply, by making every day count. You have done that and more. You are the strongest person I know, Tessa." She laughed softly. "Only because I had a cowboy who was willing to stand guard until I found my strength again." Wade pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair, feeling the solid warmth of her body against his. "I would do it all again in a heartbeat. Every night, every vigil, every moment. You are worth all of it and more." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Wade and Tessa sat together in comfortable silence, their hands intertwined, their hearts beating in rhythm. They had built something lasting from pain and fear, had created beauty from ashes, and in doing so had proved that love, when tended with care and protected with devotion, could overcome even the darkest of nightmares. Their story became legend in Wyatt, Missouri. Parents told their children about the traumatized young woman and the cowboy who stood guard over her, and how that simple act of compassion had blossomed into one of the greatest love stories the town had ever known. Young men were encouraged to be like Wade Sutton, steadfast and true. Young women were told to be like Tessa, brave enough to trust again after betrayal and trauma. But for Wade and Tessa themselves, they were simply a man and a woman who had found each other at exactly the right moment, when each needed the other most. They were a testament to the healing power of love, to the strength that comes from having someone who sees your brokenness and chooses to stay anyway. As the years continued to pass, and their hair turned gray and their movements slowed, they never stopped loving each other with the same intensity as those early days. Wade still watched over Tessa, though now it was as much to ensure she took her medicine or did not overwork herself in the garden as to keep nightmares at bay. Tessa still looked at Wade with eyes full of adoration and gratitude, seeing not just the man he was but the man he had been when she needed him most. On their 40th wedding anniversary, surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren, Wade stood and raised his glass. "To my wife, my love, my everything. 40 years ago, I made a promise to stand guard over you, to protect you, to love you. That promise has been the easiest one I have ever kept, because loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life. Here is to 40 more years if the Lord sees fit to grant them." Tessa stood and took his hand, her voice strong despite her age. "To my husband, my rock, my home. You saw me at my worst and loved me anyway. You gave me the space to heal and the strength to hope again. Every day with you has been a gift, and I look forward to every day to come." They kissed to the applause and cheers of their family, and in that moment, surrounded by the life they had built together, they were no longer the frightened young woman and the determined cowboy. They were simply Wade and Tessa Sutton, two people who had found love in the midst of darkness and had nurtured it into something brilliant and lasting. The Prairie Hope School continued to thrive under Marie's direction, expanding to include secondary education and eventually sending several students to universities back east. The Sutton Ranch remained one of the most successful in Missouri, with Billy managing it with the same integrity and dedication his father had shown. The family name became synonymous with honesty, hard work, and compassion. As Wade entered his 70s, he began to slow down, his years of hard labor taking their toll on his body. But his mind remained sharp, and his love for Tessa never wavered. On mornings when his joints ached and his muscles protested, Tessa would sit beside him and tell him stories of their early days together, of the nights he had stood guard, of the moment she had realized she loved him. "You changed everything for me," she would say, her hand gentle on his weathered face. "You gave me back my life." "And you gave me purpose," he would reply. "You made me want to be worthy of your love." In the spring of Wade's 75th year, he took ill with pneumonia. Despite Doc Williams' best efforts and the constant care of his family, it became clear that Wade would not recover. Tessa refused to leave his side, sitting by his bed day and night, holding his hand and talking to him even when he drifted in and out of consciousness. On a quiet morning in April, with spring flowers blooming outside the window and birds singing in the trees, Wade woke with unusual clarity. Tessa was dozing in the chair beside the bed, her head resting on her arms, and Wade smiled at the sight of her. "Tessa," he said softly, and she woke immediately. "I am here. I am right here." Wade reached out and cupped her face, his hand trembling with weakness. "My beautiful girl, you have made my life so much more than I ever dreamed it could be. Do not talk like that. You are going to be fine." The doctor said, "SHH, let me say this. I need you to know that I have no regrets. Every moment with you has been worth it. Every trial, every hardship, all of it was worth it to have you by my side." Tears streamed down Tessa's face. "I cannot lose you. I do not know how to be in this world without you. You are the strongest person I know. You survived things that would have broken anyone else. You will survive this too." Wade's breathing was labored, but his eyes were full of love. "And I will be waiting for you whenever your time comes. I will stand guard for you on the other side until you are ready to join me." Wade, please. I love you, Tessa Sutton. I have loved you from the moment I saw you, and I will love you beyond the end of time. I love you too, so much. You are my everything. Wade closed his eyes, a peaceful smile on his face. Then I am the luckiest man who ever lived. He passed away quietly a few hours later, surrounded by his family, with Tessa holding his hand and whispering words of love until his last breath. The entire town of Wyatt mourned the loss of Wade Sutton, a man who had embodied the best of what the frontier could produce: courage, integrity, and unwavering devotion. Tessa grieved deeply, but true to Wade's prediction, she survived. She found comfort in her children and grandchildren, in the ranch that they had built together, in the school that continued to educate new generations. She lived for another 8 years, remaining active and engaged with the community until the very end. On a warm October evening, Tessa passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 78. Her children found her in the morning, a serene expression on her face, and on her bedside table was a letter addressed to them. The letter spoke of her love for each of them, her pride in what they had accomplished, and her gratitude for the life she had been blessed to live. But the final paragraph was what made them all cry. I am not afraid to close my eyes anymore. I know that when I do, Wade will be there, standing guard as he always has, ready to take my hand and lead me home. What a gift it has been to be so deeply loved. What a privilege to have loved so completely in return. Do not mourn for me. Instead, celebrate the love that I found, the life that I lived, and the family that I leave behind. And remember that sometimes the darkest moments can lead us to the brightest futures. I was afraid to close my eyes at night, and a cowboy guarded my door until morning light. In doing so, he gave me everything. May you all be blessed enough to find such love in your own lives. Wade and Tessa Sutton were buried side by side in the Wyatt Cemetery, under a large oak tree with a view of the prairie they had loved so much. Their graves were marked by a single headstone that read, Wade Sutton, 1853–1928, and Tessa Sutton, 1856–1934. Together they built a life from love and devotion. He guarded her in life, and she guards his memory in death, united always in this world and beyond. The Sutton Ranch continued through the generations, passed down through Billy's line, and the Prairie Hope School stood for another 50 years before being converted into a community center. The town of Wyatt never forgot the love story of Wade and Tessa, and every year on their wedding anniversary, the community would gather at their graves to leave flowers and share stories. Their great-great-grandchildren still lived in Missouri, carrying on the Sutton legacy of integrity and compassion. And sometimes, on quiet nights when the wind whispered across the prairie, people claimed they could see 2 figures sitting on the porch of the old Sutton Ranch house, hands intertwined, watching the sunset together for all eternity. The story of She Was Afraid to Close Her Eyes at Night, the cowboy guarded her door until morning light, became more than just a tale of trauma and healing. It became a testament to the transformative power of love, to the courage it takes to trust again after betrayal, and to the beauty that can emerge when 2 broken souls find each other and choose to build something lasting. In the end, Wade and Tessa's legacy was not measured in acres of land or heads of cattle, or even in the many students who passed through the Prairie Hope School. Their legacy lived in the example they set of what true love looks like: patient, protective, transformative, and eternal. They proved that healing is possible, that nightmares can be overcome, and that sometimes all it takes is one person willing to stand guard while you find the courage to close your eyes and trust again. Their love story rippled through time, touching lives they would never know, inspiring generations to be braver, kinder, and more devoted. And in the quiet moments when darkness threatened to overwhelm and fear crept in, their story served as a reminder that somewhere, somehow, there is always light waiting to break through the shadows, always someone willing to stand guard until morning comes. The town of Wyatt, Missouri, changed and grew over the decades, but the Sutton name remained synonymous with the best of frontier values. The original ranch house was preserved as a historical site, and visitors came from all over to see where Wade and Tessa had built their dreams. The painting Wade had commissioned, showing a cowboy standing guard outside a door, hung in the Wyatt Historical Society, a beautiful reminder of where it all began. And so the story ended as all the best love stories do. Not with a dramatic flourish or a tragic twist, but with the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived, a love well earned, and a legacy that would endure long after the final sunset faded from the Missouri sky. Wade had promised to stand guard over Tessa, to protect her, to love her, and he had kept that promise every single day of his life. In return, Tessa had given him everything he had never known he needed: a home, a purpose, and a love that transcended time itself. They were, in the truest sense, each other's salvation and each other's home. And in the end, that was all that mattered.